Good. Welcome out there. Now we go into vertical hold, and we will start with the encounter of the then neutral Isaiah, about to be taken out and put into a different sphere for the rest of his life. Let's listen to what he hears. It's in the 6th chapter of his book. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And then we have this reaction, woe is me. He realizes he's unworthy, and yet he's been called, and we have this strange scene of the seraph bringing one of the burning charcoals, we call it nowadays, one of these coals, which we find again in the formula of blessing the incense at the offertory in the complete prayer, which used to be used until 1969. And it's a reference, actually, well, I'm confusing 2 things there. The blessing of the incense does invoke the angelic powers, but the blessing of the one about to proclaim the gospel does invoke this scene here. The seraph, who is, remember the burning one, saraf in Hebrew is to burn, is to purify the lips of the one who is about to proclaim the gospel and therefore to preach. So this has been taken up by the Christian centuries, this scene, and it is something which we would like to look at for a few seconds now as we start off. What is going on here? There are 2 things intertwined, the vertical and eventually the horizontal. The young prophet is being called to encounter what after that he will always refer to as the Holy One of Israel. This experience of the sanctity, holy, 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 penetrates all his experience and his writing forevermore. It's the Holy One. And then this element of being purified and made holy in one's speech, one's tongue, one's lips, enables him then to pass on the experience. But he has to be clean. Now that's not without importance. One cannot be an effective communicator if one is not free. The Lord has a great job on his hands when he finds a lot of clutter, when he finds that the channel is clogged, that there is stuff there not cleaned. He cannot easily get through. Now, the danger is in our sacramental life that we depend completely on the fact that we have the Lord's promise that things will happen because he is present in his sacraments. The problem is then that we forget that he also wants our full collaboration. That other part may not be happening. We're depending entirely on his work, and he wants also our full collaboration. So to perceive fully the power of the encounter, we need, like Isaiah, to come in fear and trembling and not to crash in from a noisy sacristy or from a noisy conversation. We need to calm down and to be aware and to have the eyes of our soul wide open onto the invisible. These burning ones, the seraphim and the cherubim, these wonderful mystical presences that we have around us every time we come close to the tabernacle, every time we approach the consecration. A lot is happening. One time I was at Medjugorje and we were there waiting for Our Lady to come. It was in not the main church itself, but a place where we knew that she was going to come. And we were there, and there were quite a few priests there, and it was Maria who was there, and she went into ecstasy. It's quite dramatic when it happens, just completely outside our field of contact. The prayers that she's uttering until then become, at that point, inaudible, because her voice suddenly becomes inaudible and her lips move, and she carries on communicating, and one is aware that heaven is touching earth. Our Blessed Lady is around, 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 and there's an electricity in the air in which everyone is fully switched on to that encounter. Well, how much more should it be when her Divine Son is there? She came, and the encounter was longer than usual, and we were curious. And Maria herself said to all that she had stayed longer than she usually would because there were so many priests around. We were all there in the sanctuary area, lots and lots of priests, and in profound prayer. But we had been warned before Our Lady came that there was a certain interiority required for this encounter, and we had been warned that Our Lady had been delaying her coming one time, presumably not too long before, at some other encounter, because the priests around were not in mode of receptivity. Physically, they were there lounging around with legs crossed and not at all in an attitude of verticality. It was very much one of horizontality, and Our Lady was not amused, and she let that be known by delaying her coming. She came eventually, but the message was clear. So if that's the case with her, how much more should it be with her Divine Son? We deflect graces when we're not prepared, and preparation is also physical. It makes a huge difference whether we come into church and sit or whether we come into church and kneel. It makes a huge difference whether we go into the sacristy and chat or whether we go into the sacristy and face the crucifix and go into prayer mode, bringing the altar boys with us. It's a big difference, and also we open ourselves majorly to the graces about to come to us and bombard us rather than deflect them by being just in automatic pilot, expecting the Lord to do everything. And the people pick it up. The people pick up straight away if they have to do with somebody who is transmitting somebody with whom they're in contact. We have to be, first of all, in contact. And then the Lord can act fully in the sacramental sphere, ex opere operato, and also in the communication through the human channel, ex opere operantis. The words of a person in love have the power of love. The words of a person reading a script have that of an actor. We want the real thing. The hungry sheep look up and are not fed, wrote the poet Milton. So we need to nourish the priests and the people with all our being. In that context, I would like to spend a few moments in this first half with somebody who had gifts precisely in that realm, and we must not dismiss these people whom the Lord raises up, generation after generation, to be our eyes and our ears, rather like Isaiah, to be made aware of the holiness of God and to transmit it unto us. These were people who loved God with all their being, and therefore the Lord was able to act through them and transmit without obstacle. So, unfortunately, she's left us now for her place in glory, but she had an impact on the world, and Sir Emmanuel, whom you may have come across there in Medjugorje, the Community of the Beatitudes, before she died, did some work with her and put down what her thoughts were. So we have many things coming through the likes of Sister Emmanuel, who talked to this lady, Maria Simba, and communicated her thought and her intuitions. This particular work was another one done by Nikki Eltz, and it is profound because it's not hurried, and it has also notes which are useful because they refer to church documents, and it is historically accurate. He took time to do it well, so we have her words, and we have therefore her thought clearly and calmly unpacked. So, we here have some notion of what she was given to understand with regard to Holy Mass itself. She was asked whether the poor souls had given her any knowledge as to things which were displeasing with regard to the Holy Mass celebrated. And it turned out that there were quite a few things that were. I just quote here, and do so without commentary initially, some things that came through when these questions were asked. They do not actually need that much of a commentary because they speak for themselves. But I will then add a commentary at the end of all. So listen carefully to what we have here. The question asked was this: are there things that the poor souls have told you about regular masses today that they do not like and that make them unhappy? Now remember, this particular soul, Mariissima, was a victim soul for the souls in purgatory, and over her whole life she merited that they be delivered from their pains through her suffering and prayer, but she was also able to have knowledge of where they were at. And this is the interesting bit, because in recompense she was given intuitions, and they're valid. So here is her answer to this question. Oh yes, and there is so much of it too. The so-called sign of peace and the holding of hands during the Lord's Prayer are just two such things. They come right after the consecration, and precisely while we ought to be concentrating on the Lord and on Him only. It is just then that He is closest to us, and there people go, looking around and searching for hands to grasp, rather than being uninterrupted in the deepest prayer possible with Him, and not with one's often unfamiliar neighbour. This again is bringing social ritual into the church, rather than bringing Jesus more deeply to the people. I say, often unfamiliar neighbour, because let us never put our guard down. It is precisely the most holy of places that are infiltrated the most by Satan worshippers, and physical contact greatly strengthens the curses they spread around. How happy it makes them to hold hands or even hug people just when they have been distracted from Jesus. Danger often lurks behind false familiarity or a forced unity. This, then, combined with the lack of confession, makes Masses today a successful hunt for those among us who have chosen to torment Christ's people. Pray the Lord's Prayer only with the one who gave us that greatest of all prayers, and go shake and hold hands outside later when you have the time and choice, as well as the discernment with whom to do it. Being truly prayerful and cautious does not mean unsociable or judgmental. And then there is, of course, clapping, which is the worst by far. Churches are for praying. Jesus is there in the tabernacle, and we take time off for applauding just another man, for saying or doing something that happens to be popular, correct, or strong. No, this endangers the priest, or whoever said the popular thing, by lifting his ego, rather than assisting him in his humbling mission of bringing Jesus to us. This is so wrong. Again, very much against the devotion that we must teach everyone, and especially the young today. They all hold hands and clap at school, and we must show them that churches are only for them to meet with God the Father, God the Holy Spirit, God the Son, Jesus, and Mary, and nothing else. Was it the souls themselves who said that the sign of peace and the holding of hands were problems? Yes, it was, she says. Another question. Have the souls said anything about Eucharistic ministers? Yes. Under normal conditions, only the consecrated hands of priests may distribute communion. The law of the Church states that this must be held to unless there are extraordinary circumstances, such as the priest being bedridden. Extraordinary does not mean the difference between the congregation waiting 2 minutes to receive or waiting 10 minutes. We must always prepare in prayer to receive Jesus. And people who insist on getting everything over as quickly as possible have no idea how enormous a privilege and source of graces and protection receiving our Jesus is for us. If anybody needs evidence that Eucharistic ministers, the way they are pushed today, are not within God's wishes, I can tell the following story about something that happened near here recently. A woman who distributed communion and who led many other women to do the same died recently. I knew her briefly and heard a lot about her. Before the funeral, the casket was open for family and friends to say their goodbyes. Then, at a certain prearranged time, it was closed. But within less than an hour, a close relative arrived late and begged the priest in charge to please open it again briefly, so that the loved one could also see the deceased as the others had. The priest agreed, and with 1 or 2 other witnesses on hand, lifted the cover and looked in. The small group saw something that was not the case just a very short time before. The woman's hands had turned pitch black. This was to me, as well as to others, God confirming to us that unconsecrated hands may not distribute Jesus at communion. I'll make a parenthesis there. She is pointing out that the law of the Church is that it is for an extraordinary situation, and there was in 1997, 1998, a move on the part of the authorities of the Vatican to make that clear, that the normalization and the rendering of ordinary what was to be extraordinary was the problem. Remember that these things were brought in for a reason. In Africa, it is possible for people to receive Holy Communion when there is a very large geographical area, because the catechist can have access to the tabernacle and can have worship with the people where the priest cannot reach them. But then to transport things of an extraordinary nature to that of a banalization of something given to help is actually not to help with regard to devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. It leads also to a casual attitude to the sacred mysteries and to the presence of the Lord in general. When the priest finds to his horror that somebody is in the supermarket with the Blessed Sacrament in their handbag, it is something else. And one sees very casually how people are handling the Blessed Sacrament just as anything ordinary, talking freely with the Blessed Sacrament in their pocket, and on it goes. It's a capillary effect. And we need to be very careful, because it starts here in the notion that anyone can do anything with the Godhead that is above us, and we're not in charge. So the Church has to protect the sacred. This then is the reason why in the document, the interdicasterial document, declaration on the participation of the non-ordained in the ministry of priests, 1998, by these congregations together, acting together, and approved in forma specifica by the Holy Father, this was underlined that where it had crept in, it had to be eliminated, and with energy. It was to be extraordinary and not just anything at all which can happen to favour a bad understanding of participation of the laity. That's not what it's about at all. So let's get this straight. Things are given to help the people of God and not to damage it. And if we damage our devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, we are profoundly wounding the mystical body, and the Holy Spirit is trying to address it. Indeed, right now, we know that there is a move underground, actually at the highest level, to readdress certain issues with regard to sacramental practice. The Holy Father, in union with the Congregation for the Divine Worship and Discipline of the Sacraments, is looking at various questions and addressing certain issues. Cardinal Sarah right now is going towards something quite explicit with regard to addressing certain things which have damaged profoundly the worship of the Church and its faith. There was a declaration recently there in the important liturgical encounter in London with regard to the true interpretation of the Second Vatican Council, that things have become normal which had not been in the minds of the Council Fathers. So what is now referred to as the reform of the reform, initiated by Benedict XVI, is still taking place, and this is part of it. We must understand that there are reasons for church discipline, and we're not in charge of the Blessed Sacrament as though it were just our toy. So I close the parenthesis and go back to the quotation here. Maria Simma goes on. Then there's the so-called People's Altar. She's talking German, and in German there's one word for that, Volksaltar, the inception of which also delights Satan. Jesus is in the tabernacle. That at all times should be in the center of the church. By turning the altar around, it caused a series of things to happen. To begin with, the congregation's concentration upon Jesus was badly broken by now having the face of the priest in between. And the face is, of course, as anybody knows, the strongest point of communication between people. It is only during the homily that the people should concentrate upon the priest, his words, and his face. In turning the altar around, Jesus was given a back seat, which in turn led to his being pushed off to the side, and then finally, as it is already in many modern churches, off into a separate wing, if not an entirely separate room. And it is precisely this that Satan had in mind all along, to get rid of Jesus. Some very expensive modern churches are quite surprising with regard to what they've done to the Lord. Even the brand new huge basilica in Fatima is a bit surprising on that one. One feels rather like Mary Magdalene. They have taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him. Then this other question. Have other cases of private revelation also expressed complaints about these matters similar to what the souls have told you? And her answer is this. A Marian apparition that I heard described by someone reliable who was present certainly confirms what the souls say. This apparition took place during a Mass, a few minutes after the consecration. Our Lady came, as she always does, to the visionary present at the preset time. Yet on this occasion she neither prayed with nor spoke to the visionary, and left after a few seconds, having only blessed the small group. When the visionary was later asked by the other people present why it happened so very quickly, her answer, with a move of her hand, was, "Because Jesus was standing here." So, if Our Lady does not find it all right to communicate with someone while our Lord is present in body and blood, how dare anyone else interrupt our communicating with him? Now, what she's saying here is that Our Lady in this was giving an example, that the stage was all that of Jesus. And if the facing of the people leads to the mentality of in some way playing to the gallery and being not a mystagogue but a DJ, then the dynamic of the liturgy has changed even in the second part of the Mass, that which is actually vertical in its orientation. It's becoming even there man-orientated. So there's a hijacking going on there. Our Lady in that was giving the model that all else should be silent, so that the voice of her Son should be heard. As on Mount Tabor, what did the Father say? "This is my beloved Son, hear him." So listening is something that we need to educate the people to. And again, the priest listening in prayer knows instinctively what the Lord does not want, and he will not do that kind of thing. And by the way, the people too are at it. Many people will fill any available gap with something but silence. And even the most sacred moment of Holy Communion is often jeopardized. People itch to fill that with some reflection, anything but silence, and therefore anything but the direct whispering of Jesus. It has to be always mediated, and he can't really speak. And worse still, some of these communion reflections draw applause. That's defeating all, and a huge victory for you know who. Our bishop, in a letter to us priests, warned about these communion reflections at funerals because they were using them as a means of making a eulogy. So, there's another question coming in here. It was publicized lately, says Maria Simba, that communion in the hand was the fourth warning given to the sister who saw Our Lady in Akita, Japan. Hearing this made me very happy. I make a jump. One time they asked Mother Teresa, soon to be canonized as you know, what was the thing that upset her most when she travelled around. And immediately and unexpectedly she answered, communion in the hand. She saw it everywhere, and she knew how much it wounded the Lord and his holy angels. Before the break, I would like to quote something which, as a juxtaposition to what I've just quoted, puts us in another ambit, that of where we're coming from. It was in student days. I had in the same class, and eventually, actually, strangely enough, the day before me, he defended his doctorate in Rome in the same aula, and he was a monk, but a Maronite monk, and a good man of prayer, well formed as they would be, and he wanted me at all costs to experience their liturgy in the Church of St. Anthony, near San Pietro in Vincolis, there in the area of the middle of Rome. And I went and found the church and was plunged into this voyage in the TARDIS into the distant past, for there one sees time standing still, not in a hurry to budge. And so, after coming back, I sat down and wrote this, because there I had realized what liturgy prayed at length was. It was the creation of a place where something of what Isaiah had can be ours as well. Holy, holy, holy. And the house was filled with smoke, and one is in contact with these burning ones, the seraphim and the cherubim, all around, hovering above and below, and Christ in the midst. So I just wrote this, and I end this first part with this little sonnet. I just called it Right. It was written after the Maronite liturgy, but it was recalling also the Sunday morning that I had climbed Meteora in Greece on the 6th of August, Transfiguration 1972, which that year was a Sunday. And that hit me there too, having assisted at dawn at a long 3-hour liturgy in Greek. Very moving, very moving, very moving.
Right. O world apart, the art of being hid within a cloud so bright that light alone is seen by the inward eye. This 'tis that bid the three that climbed that ridge and heard the unknown not say or utter aught of what no man had hitherto been shown. This was the word that bade all words not be, for listening can be but in holding well a tremble heard. O Tabor, here I climb again that place that on thy feast I walked. Here again, the incense sweet that drugged a magic space hath dazed the memory's cells with quiet pain. Of wanting much, of wanting such a God as none did long forego that hither trod.
So, I would like to conclude with a quote from somebody who is an expert in the domain. She is actually a Lutheran sister, equivalent of a nun. It's Maria Basilea Schlink, and she has written quite a lot of well-researched material about the way in which demons infiltrate our cult our worship, our society through one specific means. It's that of music. And it is presumed that music is purely neutral, and therefore that we can use the music of the time to make it ours. It's the old argument that used to be used in the revivals: why should the devil have all the best music? Well, there is a problem when it comes to certain types of music, and she goes into it. For all, she says, who love the young, it must be a grief to see those who are saved, perhaps from lives deep in sin, now encountering rock music in Christian circles. Rock is frequently used for evangelistic purposes, since it is argued one has to reach the young today where they are. Yet how easily young people can backslide as a result. For rock remains rock, no matter what words are put to the music. The essence of rock lies in the music, independent of the lyrics. It is impossible to isolate so-called Christian rock from the roots and history of rock. Christian rock is an offshoot, inspired and characterized by the same spirit. Missionaries who have served in heathen countries confirm that rock is the music of demons. Often this kind of music is used when demons are invoked or worshipped. A missionary couple in Kalimantan reported the reactions of local people to Christian rock. Why are you calling on the spirits with your music? They recognized the same psychic stimulation by which they used to contact dark demonic powers. The well-known rock star David Bowie, who played the role of Pilate in the blasphemous film The Last Temptation of Christ, said, "Rock and roll will occupy and destroy you. It lets in the lower elements and shadows. Rock has always been the devil's music." In a medical periodical, the following observation was made about the effects of rock. The whining chords of electronically amplified guitars and the hectic staccato of the percussion instruments make the nerves vibrate and shut out all thinking. A doctor added, there is a loss of control over bodily functions, a state of ecstasy with epileptic-like convulsions, screaming, biting, laughing, wetting, and tearing of clothes is considered to be an euphoric and pleasurable experience. It is a contradiction when rock music, with its known effects, such as shedding of inhibitions, aggression, rebellion, unbridled sexuality, and a negative change in the personality, is used to present the Christian message to young people. Christian rock musicians may give a clear personal testimony of salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, but even if their desire is to witness, the music they use to this end is characterized by another spirit. This is not a matter of different tastes, styles, and cultures. It is the spirit behind rock music that is decisive. Since Christian rock has been in existence for about 20 years, this is the time of writing, one would expect to find lasting, definite results of rock evangelism. An objective survey done of Bible colleges and missionary societies asked if any students had been converted through Christian rock concerts or called to full-time Christian service in the context of such events. Only one society had one person with such an experience, and he had had to be dismissed for immorality. So, we try to pander to a certain class of people in an outreach which has the value of its source. We have noticed actually on a Sunday that without any huge drive of publicity, the number of young people coming there to the classical old High Mass with incense and asperges and all that goes with it, fully sung and very calm, lasting about an hour and a quarter, the number of young people is proportionately very high, and they're just coming out of the woodwork and from very far away. It's interesting. They want to be there and they come back. Because the soul responds to what has always worked, and gentleness heals more than loud thumping noises. The young are not as thick as we make them out to be. We were young once, and we too had an instinct of what was deep and what was superficial. Is it not true? So I just conclude with a few bars of what is another way of putting it. It's the way in which authentic harmony heals, and that is the patrimony of humanity. We share this with all the inhabitants of the world. We can produce harmony, and true harmony honours God and heals man. In Wales, where I come from, we have the joy of having harmony at our doorstep. We just go to church and automatically we go into harmony. It's there from the Middle Ages and it carries on. And the organ is used well, pulling out all the stops. So I just conclude with a few bars from what we would hear back in Wales in our natural worship.